Welcome to State of the Union. I'm Arthur Goldstein.
I'm
And
Jonathan Holloway.
Jonathan, I've been having a very difficult week. As you know, I'm working F status at Francis Lewis High School 2 days a week. And I'm struggling to squeeze 5 days worth of complaining into 2 days. And when I share this with my colleagues, they are just remarkably unsympathetic. I mean, I tell them how hard it is, and they say really unfriendly things to me. I'm just kind of shocked by their reactions.
Well, I'm not getting very much sympathy for my Saturday. I work half a day a week right now, so
Half a day a week. You have
so
to
I
squeeze.
really sympathize with your lack of sympathy. I'm getting the same.
You have to squeeze 5 days worth of complaining into half a day. Now that's a challenge. I don't understand why people are just so unsympathetic. My colleagues, my UFT brothers and sisters, they tell me to do things that I think are not physically possible. Well, who do we have on the podcast this week, Jonathan?
Well, on the topic of complaining, I went earlier this week to DeWitt Clinton High School to complain about mayoral control, where I met our guest, Tom Sheppard, who was there also complaining. Tom is a member of the PEP. I'm really excited that he agreed to come on today.
Yeah, me too. That seems like a really good get. You did good work, Jonathan. You should get a raise and a promotion.
That you get to decide that, right?
Yeah, we're going to double your salary effective immediately.
Okay. Let's keep that in mind, but let's get on to Tom. And welcome back. We are here now with Tom Sheppard. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name, hi everyone. My name is Tom Sheppard. I am the Bronx Community Education Council President's representative on the New York City Panel for Educational Policy, also known in New York State law as the Board of Education for the City School District of the City of New York. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tom.
For coming on.
And thank you for mentioning that. I want to ask the first question if I can. What's your story that got you involved in all this?
You know, that could take all day, but I will say I've shared this particular story a number of times. Several years ago, I was a volunteer at my kid's school. I was on the school leadership team and the Title I parent. And I got I also work at Apple part-time, right? And I got a job interview with I'm just going to say a exclusive rich private school in the Bronx, right? Oh. And as an assistant director of technology. And so I interviewed for the job and, took a tour of the school, and I was very impressed with what I saw. And after that interview, I said, can I have 24 hours to think about it? The answer was sure. And then I left that school and went to my kids' school. They were having a school leadership team meeting the same day. And on the drive from that school to my kids' school, I got really upset because, you saw what, $50,000 a year could buy you in terms of a private school education. And then all the things I saw at that school, things like, robotics labs and, a cafeteria that looked like you were in like a Whole Foods, right? It wasn't even a cafeteria, it was a dining hall. Competition, swim teams and all kinds of stuff, right? And I was just so impressed with what I saw at that school. But then I got really upset because my school didn't have any of those things. And when I got to the school leadership team meeting, at the end of the meeting, I asked the principal a very specific question. And that question was, what can we do to improve access to technology for the kids in this school? And her response was, well, I don't know. What you have in mind? And I said, well, you know what? Let me think about that tonight. And I'll get back to you tomorrow. Well, I got home that night. And so I got these two really big things on my mind, right? One is this job at a private school that's willing to pay me really good money to manage their technology, or my kids' school who didn't have any of that, right? And I made a choice that night that changed my life. And that choice was I turned the job down and, committed the next 3 years of my life volunteering at my kids' school to improve access to technology. And that's kind of where it started for me in terms of advocacy in public schools. And the last thing I will just say is, in District 11, in the school that I was volunteering in, what I started to see was, the environment and the conditions that existed in my kids' school were not unique to my kids' school. And I started to see it all over the district and all over the borough, right? And, eventually, as I moved in these spaces, realized that it existed all over this city. So that was the real thing that got me involved in it. And then, you saw it wasn't just technology, right? It was the infrastructure of the buildings, right? Lead and water, um, you know, inadequate electrical capacity, right? Lack of sports facilities, lack of programming, overcrowded classrooms, right? And
Yeah.
there were just so many issues that played out disproportionately in the Bronx where I lived, that really um, motivated me to, just speak up and advocate for parents.
So I see a lot of those issues that you mentioned, even in my school, which is pretty well equipped. We're the largest school in Queens, and we had a principal two principals ago who decided that there was going to be technology everywhere, and he bought computers and placed them everywhere in the building, and he did address one of those things you mentioned, but class size is the thing that really bothers me as a teacher. I teach English as a second language, and my kids come from other countries and they don't speak English. And I tend to teach the beginners because nobody else ever wants to do it. So I volunteer to do it. I'm actually retired this year, but I'm teaching 2 days a week there. So I see what happens, and
If I could add
it's
something to that right quick,
go ahead.
because um, I am impressed that a principal could have the capacity to add technology to a school. Just say, you know what, it doesn't exist the way that it should here, and make the decision to do it, right? Um, it is, and if we put that in the context of class size, right? And one of the real differences between, let's say, schools in Queens and schools in the Bronx, is that class size is a function of more than one thing, right? Like it could be a function of not enough space, right? Like
Yeah,
physical space, or it could
absolutely.
be a function of not having enough teachers. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the Bronx, one of the things that happened as a function of mayoral control
Mm-hmm.
was most of our big school buildings that could have had the capacity to do the same kinds of things were literally like buildings were just carved up into like a whole bunch of little schools. where
Terrible. Yeah.
like decisions couldn't be made like in a large school that has several thousand kids in it, where a
Hmm.
principal can say, I want to add technology to the school and move resources around to be able to do it. Where in a small school, you can't make those kinds of decisions because, if you have 200 kids in a school, adding 200, let's say, iPads to a school becomes cost prohibitive, right? And the cost of doing that is actually like the cost of a teacher, which in a small school you can't afford to do, where in a larger school you can kind of shift resources around and be able to do it. So I think that that's one of the ways it kind of plays out like it plays out differently in different parts of the city. And it's one of the reasons why I have personally been fighting the way I have, um, uh, to reduce class sizes in a way, um, that allows for more flexibility for, you know, schools to hire more teachers in the case of the Bronx.
So I just want to finish what I was saying about
Yeah, yes,
class
sir.
size because I do teach newcomers, and newcomers in particular need more attention. They don't understand English. And if you give me 34 of them at a time, which is what I will get, and if 10 of them are sight, students who lack formal education and are not literate in their first language, it's going to be a very, very tough thing for me. I understand that my building probably has it easier in some ways than the buildings you speak of, and I think it is an obscenity what Michael Bloomberg did to the schools in the Bronx, and we only survived because we had better test scores. But if you read about what do test scores really measure, they might measure the income of a community. That's what they might measure. They might, in our school, perhaps kids might get extra help when they need it, which they might not get in another school because perhaps because it's available to them, because it's affordable to them, and because it's a priority for them. And I do think that other schools get neglected. I can't address, of course, your school as well as you can, because I've been in this particular school for 30 years, you know.
Well, I would also say that uh, there's been a lot of debate around um, the equity of or the
Hmm.
cultural responsiveness of these exams, of the measurements, right? And uh, folks have made arguments around additional test prep as a way to boost scores. And the problem is that when we are dealing with curriculums that don't like teach our children basic skills like literacy, right?
Yeah.
Then all the tests in the world are not going to like solve for that, right? And um so you're right in the fact that test scores are the thing that they use um you know to keep some schools safe while making other schools vulnerable, right? And you know for me, I think that at the end of the day, we have to take a step back and we have to not just look at the material and look at the standards, but we also have to look at the environment and ask ourselves: is the environment conducive to learning? Right? Is the material right? Um, uh, Culturally responsive and respectful to the students who are it's being given to? And three, um does that material or do these curriculums actually provide or give a skill set to our young people? And
But
yeah, go ahead.
I just would like to first agree completely with everything you said first. And I don't want you to think that because we survive because of test scores that I am endorsing
Oh,
the
no, I didn't
tests.
think that at
I
all.
I have written extensively about the tests. I teach in a high school. I've written about the high school tests. And since you're talking about literacy, I'm certified to teach English. I have prepped kids for the English Regents exam. And it's, to my mind, it's the second worst exam we give in the city. It does not measure reading. It does not measure writing. It does not measure literacy. It's based on Common Core. And I would argue that the
Which is
thing
an
it
abject
measures,
failure.
right, the thing that it measures is Common Coreness, the ability to look at a paragraph and pull out a factoid from it. That is not reading, and that does not encourage a love of reading. And I have had students who really were not competent in English who have passed this test with over 65. And the strategy was, well, I didn't read it. I just read the question and found the A, B, C, D. They are not required to construct arguments. They give them argument A and argument B. Which one do you like better? Select one and back it up with the facts we have given you. The English Regents exam is a terrible, terrible exam. And I'll just say the worst exam is the NICESLAT, which is used to measure the level of English in my students. That's the worst exam I've ever seen. And I'm no genius, but I can write a better test in 45 minutes than the test that the state pays all this money to produce. They are terrible.
And it extends into math, right? So, if you
Well,
can't read
Jonathan.
if you can't read the math problem enough to be able to draw
Mm-hmm,
the information out of it you need to answer the question, right? It doesn't
mm-hmm.
necessarily even mean that you don't understand the concept, right? It means that the wording and the literacy, um or the structure of these things in terms of literacy is such that children or our young people are not able to comprehend the question in a way that allows them to answer it, right?
Of
um you know
course.
I am always keen to make connections between one and the other, right? Because math is really about solving problems. And in order to solve a problem, you got to like be able to read and comprehend the problem. And
Right.
if our structures are designed in such a way that it doesn't provide that, right, then you see lower test scores, right, in both ELA and math. And I think that we really do need to, you know, take a step back and look at our approach to those things. And I will just say, bringing it back kind of full circle, right? Like, and those things cannot happen, right, with overcrowded spaces, right? Like, spaces have to be, especially when we are talking about, even if we apply a citywide standard, right? Like, let's not even carve out different parts of the city, but if we just use the citywide standard, half of our children, half of our young people, right, are functionally illiterate according to the tests. And, you know, so for me, it requires taking a look at our curriculums, it requires taking a look at our approaches, and it also requires creating spaces where we can give our young people the additional attention they need, right, to be able to flourish. And that, in big part or in large part, means smaller classroom sizes.
So,
Sure.
so you're talking about what we can do. You're actually a member of the PEP.
Yes.
I guess you're the most powerful person in the room right now. Maybe not. What can you as the PEP do? And I'm sort of bringing us into a different direction. What should you as the PEP be able to do?
So I'm gonna. I'm not gonna say it's a trick question, right? But the PEP, or the city school board under state law, is tasked with doing several things, and one of those things is the primary one is advise the chancellor in matters of policy, right? So that's one side, and then the other side is advise and approve matters of policy as they relate to student performance and educational achievement, right? And one is advise on like the welfare of the system, and the other is approve policies directly related to student achievement. What is it? Student performance and educational achievement. Now, you would think, or that's the task of the PEP, right? It's primary responsibility. The problem with it is the way that the board is structured, right? So when we talk about a system of, let's say, mayoral control right now, where you know a supermajority of the members are appointed by the mayor, right? One each by the borough presidents. And now with a recent change, one parent elected from CECs from each borough. Before that change, I was the only one, right? Like I was the one elected by all 32 districts. But now, that's been broken out. So, you would hope or you would think that a responsive system would be one in which those members actually did that. But the problem here is that they don't. And the reason why they don't is the mayor, right? The mayor and the chancellor. The mayor appoints the chancellor. The mayor appoints a supermajority of members on the board. And as a result of that, the school board generally tends to run as a lot of people call it a rubber stamp, right? Like it does what the mayor wants, full stop. And, you have folks like me in the space, that are pushing back hard against that, right? Like at the end of the day, the system is supposed to serve 1 million students and their families, right? And, if it's not doing that, then we have a responsibility to voice that. And, when we talk about this system, right, this system does not respect that. Because I would just say if it did, right, like parents and families and especially our students would have a lot more say in what education looked like for them, right? Or what they want to get out of it. How do we construct policies that respect that, right? But that doesn't happen. And with this particular administration, it's gotten even worse, right? To the point where you can have a school board meeting where you have 100 people come in and say they want or don't want something, and the school board will do the exact opposite. And, it is not just disheartening, right? But it's actually a bit terrifying, right? When you look at systems that are supposed to serve, the public, like our school systems and health systems, et cetera, right? Really being kind of set up in ways where they are completely unresponsive to the community. They do not serve the best interests of students, right? They do not prepare them for career. They do not prepare them for college. And even the schools that people are fighting to get into, right? Like there's schools that people are like, these spaces have become really toxic around conversations about screen schools and specialized high schools and gifted and talented programs. But if you like take a step back and look at the end of this system, right? So 12th grade, when they finish, what you find is 92% of all students that graduate high school in New York City, right, that go to college, right, go to a city or state college, a public like CUNY or SUNY college. And that includes these other programs, right? Like the specialized high schools of the world and the screen schools, et cetera. They all go to
You know
Huh?
that I taught at a specialized high school. It was true. The number
Yeah.
wasn't 92%, but it was really high. You're dead
And
on. You're dead
but
on correct.
yeah, and then what happens is many of those students, because their educational experiences were structured so much differently than what, like, the way colleges are structured, right? Many of them go into college and are just as unprepared for a college experience as those who didn't go to a specialized high school, right? And you see that bear out in how I would love to see, like, a system follow students through a college experience after they finish, like, a public school experience, and see and quantify how many of them went through a 4-year college experience. How did they do in college? Did they graduate on time? What were their GPAs, right? Like, be able to track it after high schools, because you can't we rate high schools in terms of graduation, right? But the problem with that is, if the metrics or the standards around that can be manipulated, right, then it doesn't give you an accurate reflection of how prepared students are when they leave this system.
I
And
was just speaking to a young teacher last night who was very unhappy because he was in a school where everybody passes. Everybody passes. The principal manages it so that everybody passes. And there are all these programs and metrics. And if you're not part of the everybody passes bandwagon, you're going to be in trouble. So I understand that. I want to bring you back to something you brought up before, mayoral control. And you were
Mhm.
saying how upset you are to see 100 people in an audience demanding this or that, and the PEP giving whatever. This is not new. Perhaps de Blasio was better than Bloomberg. I don't know. But I remember going to PEP meetings and school closing meetings in particular at at Jamaica. I went to the school closing meeting, and the community got up, and the clergy got up, and the parents got up, and the students and the teachers got up, and everybody got up and said, "Save this school." It was a tremendous thing, and they just voted close the school. And I've seen that happen in PEP under Bloomberg. To the point, Liza Featherstone wrote an article called "Our Fake School Board" for a Brooklyn newspaper, where she said this board doesn't reflect the will of the community, not even a little bit. Perhaps de Blasio improved it a little. I don't know. Perhaps it was not as outrageous as it was under Bloomberg, but I think Eric Adams is very similar to Bloomberg. He's taking money from the interests that propelled Bloomberg, or that Bloomberg propelled. So I'm not surprised that you find yourself in this situation. Mayoral control in New York City, I would argue, is tantamount to mayoral dictatorship. The mayor wants this, the mayor gets this. And if you, Tom Sheppard, don't like it, well, too bad. You get a chance to exercise your opinion during the next election 4 years from now, and no time before or after. And Michael Bloomberg, as you know, bought himself a third term despite the twice voiced will of the people to limit terms. And the term limits were particularly for people like Michael Bloomberg. I'm a little off on a tangent here, but
you're actually not, though,
I like,
because
okay.
if I could add something, right? I do want to, I don't want to say push back, because what you're saying is correct. I I would think that since 2020, right? Since I was elected by CECs, you
Hmm.
know, not responsive even a little bit doesn't apply anymore, right? Because
Okay.
I would tend to think that for the last 3 years I would be the little bit part, right? And because I've been on, when it before this past change, when I was the only CEC member, I was on the 14-1 side of plenty of votes, right?
Hmm.
And and those votes have always reflected the will of the community, right? So, to me, if I could be, if
Your one has reflected the will of the community.
that's right, and
Okay.
it
It
may
was
still
all
be a rubber stamp,
too.
but it's a smeared rubber stamp, right? Like it's a rubber stamp where the stamp, when you pull the stamp back, it ain't so like crisp and clean anymore, right? Like,
Okay.
I've always seen myself as, um, you know, doing my best to reflect the will of people, right? If
Hmm.
it's going to pass, it's going to pass, but it ain't going to be just like everybody putting their heads down and just saying yes and moving on, right? Like I'll be kicking and screaming and voting no the whole time.
So the vote isn't 14-1 anymore. What is the vote now?
The vote is 23, right? So you have it was 50. So before I became a member, it was 13, right? You had 8 by the mayor, 1 by each of the borough presidents, right?
Hmm.
And then in 2020, when state law was changed, they added 2 more seats. So the mayor got 1 more for 9, right? And they added a seat to be chosen, to be the person in that seat is elected by CEC presidents. So then that was 1 additional. So from like 2020 to like January of this year, we had 15 members. And then they changed state law again. And starting in January of this year, we went to 23 members. So
Okay.
what ended up happening was the 1 seat, for parents turned into 5 representative of each borough now. So you had 5 from the borough president, 1 from each borough. You have 5 from CEC presidents, 1 from each borough. So that's 10, right? And then you got 13 for the mayor now, right? So, so we went to like 23 members. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, just even under Bloomberg, we had, I remember the Manhattan rep would often vote against some
Patrick
of the worst.
Sullivan. Yeah.
Patrick Sullivan would often vote against. And
Yeah.
all of us know Caleres, who
Yeah.
often
And I know
voted against.
Patrick.
So,
Yeah.
so is there more of a pushback? Is it Tom Sheppard on his own, or
Nah.
are there really
Yeah,
alliances on that path?
Yeah. So I think for the past like year and some change, right? What you have seen, especially with me being there as an elected parent, um, you really see um, almost a split, right? Like there's the mayoral appointees, and then there are the um, like borough president's appointees and the CEC members, right? So, um, so there have been some recent votes that have been, pretty close, and um, but they're not just these unanimous votes anymore, right? They
Okay.
might be
So
like
now they are 13-10 instead of 14-1. Is that what you're suggesting here?
I would hope, but I would probably say closer to, um, there's still a couple of borough presidents and CEC members that, do vote firmly with the mayor's appointees, right? Like Staten Island, for example. Both the CEC member and the borough president's appointee pretty much have never voted, um, you know,
Against the mayor.
yeah, except last year, right? And I want to bring up one particular example where, well, 2, but the interesting thing is all of these kind of, oh my God, they're not a rubber stamp votes anymore happened while I was a member, right? So one big one was the vote around the Pearson Gifted and Talented contract a couple years ago, right? So this is during the previous administration, and what ended up happening was the borough president's members. Well, no, it was Staten Island. So at the time, it was Peter Calandrella who voted against the gifted and talented contract. And then there were 5 mayoral appointees who voted against the Pearson gifted and talented contract.
Wow.
And then I voted against it. So it went down, right? And,
That's
you know, that
remarkable.
happened to be Peter Calandrella's last day on the PEP, right? Because, you know, the Staten Island Borough president. And, you know, but that was one of the things we fought for in a change in the law, was so that members could not just be summarily dismissed because you voted differently than your appointing authority, right? But it just didn't work out for Peter in that regard. But last year, what happened was the Fair Student Funding formula, right? So, you know, there's a video online that I think the Moore caucus of the UFT put together, where it was kind of like me going toe to toe with them. And at the end, the way it worked out was that first month, it was April of last year, the Fair Student Funding formula got rejected, right? And it was the mayor's appointees. I think they were short 2 for that vote, and they voted yes. Every borough president's appointee, including Staten Island, abstained, and I voted no. And it did not pass. They had I think it was 7 votes, and it went down. And you know, then they came back the next month and kind of ran roughshod and got it through. But
I'm sorry to hear that. It was such a good story until then. Can we just pause for one moment, Jonathan?
yeah.
Pearson.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. See? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Wrong hat.
And now it's time to meet Mr. Peabody. And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like. And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Wrong hat.
I take a 7.5.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like. And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Ooh, don't know my own strength.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like. And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
But that trick never worked.
This time for sure. Presto! Well, I'm getting close.
And now it's time for another special feature.
So that was part 1 of our interview with Tom Sheppard. Tom will be back next week, where we will show you part 2. And who do we have this week as our next guest, Jonathan?
We have a Bronx ELA teacher, Rebecca Torres.
ELA, that's English.
English.
That's not math. So we have a not math teacher this week.
We have a not math teacher this week.
Okay, well, I'm happy about that. Let's go to that now.
So we are back with State of the Union and our new favorite segment. We're interviewing a teacher, and this is Rebecca Torres. Arthur, you have a question for Rebecca?
Yeah, I understand, Rebecca, that you are not a math teacher. Jonathan loves math teachers. You're not a math teacher, and
No.
he asked you to come on anyway. What do you teach?
I teach English currently to 9th graders. I used to teach English to 6th graders for 9 years.
But
But
you
now,
got a promotion.
yeah,
We moved you up.
yeah. Well, yeah. Big
Okay.
change. Big
Okay.
change.
So are 9th graders more or less crazy than 6th graders?
That's a really good question. I think is different. It's very different. I think 6th graders are like at this like awkward stage where they're
Mhm.
like kind of starting to get to know themselves in the world, but they're still like really awkward. And then in 9th grade, I feel like they have like a better sense of self, but there's like all these hormones and other things that are making them act a certain way.
Yep.
So I think that makes them crazy in a different way. It's very interesting to see.
So
It's a
Jonathan
very
and I are high school teachers, and the common wisdom among high school teachers is that middle school is a lot more difficult than high school. The children are at these, I don't know, they're kind of at this stage where they're very difficult, and it's much more difficult a job than our job has been. Would you agree with that?
so I haven't finished the year. I think I need to give it the full year
Hmm.
to get the full scope because kids are so different from September to January to even June. But so far, it's much easier, I would say.
What are you teaching? We try to feature teachers and to ask them some special thing that they bring to the classroom. That's kind of what this segment is about. Have you got some special thing that you bring into your classroom right now?
Um, so right now I am teaching them Fahrenheit 451.
Okay.
Um, this is a first for me, so like I feel like I'm learning right along with the kids. But I think the like unique part is like I am planning to talk to them about like so okay, I have to backtrack. So in sixth grade, we got an opportunity to like kind of revamp our curriculum. So like we were using expeditionary learning, and then my principal like entrusted us, and she let us kind of create our own curriculum. But you know, we use resources. Like I was still using resources from expeditionary learning or other resources like colleagues were sharing with me. So I created like a curriculum. I'm putting created because like some of it was like taken from other people's ideas, and I like I'm going to be honest, my goal was to make it no white authors. I was like, we're not going to do that.
Well, you're kind of getting in your way because last I heard Ray Bradbury was white.
So so this year I like changed it up. So I decided to teach Fahrenheit 451. I had a lot of reservations about it because I wanted to stay true to myself and what I had been doing previously. But I have to be honest, like Fahrenheit 451 actually is super relevant right now.
Absolutely.
And I was going more like for relevance, like I wanted like a classic book. Like I'm putting quote around classic, right? Because I guess people can debate what classics are, right? Um, but I wanted to teach them a novel, you know, that is like rigorous, that is going to like challenge them like on a lot of different levels. But then I wanted it to be relevant because I feel like teenagers won't buy in if it's not relevant. You know what I mean? I feel like they will just go over their head. So that
And
was
the
kind of
rel-
what go
Mhm.
ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The relevance. Have you actually been talking about book banning as well?
Yeah, we kind of started to speak about it, but I kind of like wanted to jump a little bit. So we spoke about like the historical context for it first. I kind of like spoke about it briefly. They know about book banning, like they've been hearing about it, but we're going to read the first part and then we're going to come back to it because I feel like almost they need a little bit like to read through the book and kind of like grapple with what their feelings are with it first. And then we're just going to start talking about it. And I'm going to bring in articles and we're going to talk about like the current situation with book banning happening all over the country. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a great time to choose this particular book. I when I assign books, I mostly taught English as a second language, and when I had advanced kids, I would always try to give something that the kids could relate to and love, and try to trick them into loving reading, into reading as an enjoyable and worthwhile process, as opposed to the stuff you'll see on the English Regents exam. And I always taught books. One of my favorite books that I taught was The Joy Luck Club, which related to my newcomers, because it's about newcomers and it's about multiple generations of newcomers. And I think by using Fahrenheit 451 in this era of book banning, you're doing something really important and worthwhile, be Ray Bradbury a white author or not. Maybe an author of color will write something about book banning. The current generation of book banning, but I don't know of a book like that. But I think you made a really good choice. How's it going?
So we just started. Okay, so I have mixed feelings about it. I think that so I feel like one thing the students need a lot of support of it, like comprehending, especially like abstract ideas, like figurative language, all of those things. So I think it's going to require a lot of concentration on their part. Like they're going to need to buy in as much as I'm buying in. They got to meet me because they're going to have to do a lot of work on their end trying to comprehend what we're going through. I'm going to have to support them, of course. We just read the very beginning, and so far one class reacted kind of strongly to it and the other class was kind of like no reaction. So I was like, I hope it's like, I hope as we keep reading, as we keep having conversations, I try to throw in a lot of discussion as we read because I feel like that will help kids like comprehend, but also make those like text to self connections that will be hopefully lead to textual like other types of connections, inference making, all of those things that like really awesome things that happen. So I haven't had it like that happened like Friday, Thursday. So hopefully this week we'll see what happens. We literally just started the book, so we'll
So
see.
So
Rebecca,
you
this
said
is
something very interesting that I want to actually two things. One is that one class had a strong reaction and another class had little reaction. I've been thinking lately about Bill Gates and other people who try to prove value added for teachers, and the fact that you can teach the same thing in two different classes and have two completely different reactions despite you being the same teacher in both classes sort of puts the kibosh to the notion that you or me or Jonathan as a teacher adds value or doesn't add value. We are a factor in the classroom, but you've got, as a high school teacher, 34 other factors in that classroom that are worthy of consideration. I wanted to say that. And you mentioned a strong reaction in one of your classes. What does the strong reaction look like?
Reactions as we read, so like hearing kids like say oh wow or things like that like as they're reading or ask questions. So I'm wondering if it's like the culture of the classes, because
Yeah,
one class like they call out a lot, but like it's not like to talk about irrelevant things. Like we'll be
right.
reading, we'll be discussing, and then like they won't even raise their hand to like shout something out, and then it'll be a discussion. Somebody will respond at the back and
Mm-hmm.
somebody, and so it'll become a natural kind of conversation. And I've kind of like fed into that because at first it like seems disorderly. You're like, whoa, everybody's like kind of speaking without raising their hand, but then it allows the kids to kind of grapple with the work themselves. And I think that's really valuable. I think that will help them like feel more confident with their reading and their learning because
Mm-hmm.
like they're like pushing the conversation forward. But the other class like, and like I've tried to get them to discuss, but like this is just like the personalities in this class. In the other group, they raise their hand. They're like a lot more like reserved almost, but they do participate. They do like have things to say and they do kind of discuss, but they are kind of like more so looking at me to lead the discussion, whereas the other group kind of like just takes it upon themselves. Like those are the personalities. So
happens. Rebecca, for some context, you're teaching high school, but
yeah,
this is not a high school. This was a
yeah.
middle school for 10 or 15 years, and this is just the first year with a high school. And I have a whole bunch of questions about that. I have like questions about the wisdom of it, but leave that aside. But you are now teaching a ninth grade class in a school that's never had a ninth grade English class
No,
before.
no.
So one is I want to know what that's like, and two is just in the back of my mind, is that really the right thing to do? Should you be creating curriculum, or should the city have just given you something, or is this working out better? What are your thoughts about that?
So yeah, so our school, like I think it started in 1997, so it's been a middle school for a very very long time. And literally this year we started to expand, so we're going to become a 6 through 12. We were a 6 through 8, so I was a sixth grade teacher in a very solidified middle school, and now I'm a ninth grade teacher, and we like this is the first year, so it has been very weird. I've had mixed feelings because, well, okay, let me answer the question. Should I have like created the curriculum or should I have been given the curriculum? Um, I think one thing I keep saying to myself is I'm really glad that I made this move like in my 10th year where I feel like I'm like more solidified in like how to be a teacher. I feel like when you start teaching, not only are you learning the content, learning how to teach the content, how to relate it, you know what I mean, how to make it work for kids, how to differentiate it, et cetera, et cetera. You are also learning just how to be a teacher, which is like also a skill in and of itself. So like I don't have to do that. Like I already know how to be myself and how to like support kids and like classroom manage all that. That part is like a lot easier this year. So like that allowed me to to focus exclusively on like, okay, so how do I teach ninth grade English? The cool thing was I was given access to curriculum. I was given access to HMH. I was given access to also just like other curriculums that like, so like a couple of my colleagues have taught high school before. So they have curriculum and they were just able to kind of like share me on what they've done in the past and be like, hey, like this is what I've done. I've done this. I've done this. Here's my advice to you. Cause I've taught high school before. So here's what I can like do, help you with. And then of course, like I looked into like a lot of other like curriculums that I could get access to, like online, etc. So I was able to kind of pick and choose like from people's like curriculum. So Fahrenheit 451, part of it is an established curriculum actually that somebody has already done and was kind of given to me. So I was actually able to take that and like adjust. So I feel like I think you should be able to do what is most comfortable. And what's most comfortable is to get a lot of resources. I'm not building anything from scratch this time around. Like I don't feel comfortable doing that yet. Like I think would need a little bit more experience with ninth grade. But I'm really just taking what people have done already in high school and just like making it mine. That's what I'm doing. Cause I feel like I was looking at what that person's curriculum, it just didn't fit my style, but I took like those activities, like the way they read certain things, like the way you're supposed to like track motifs, etc. Like I took that and I've adapted that. So, but I think that only works because I've taught before and you know what I mean? Like I'm able to take it and adapt it to what I need to do. So I don't know if that really answers the question. I don't know. It's like a combo. I think it's good to have a combo because I feel like there's value in like you creating your own stuff or like you taking what somebody has done and making it yours because I think it's harder to teach other people's stuff. I feel like, and then it becomes more genuine when you're teaching something you've created. Like, and the kids I feel like can feel that it's like you. I don't know how to explain it. It's like.
No, there is something called teacher voice, which I really believe in, that you and I and Jonathan, we're all different individuals. You know, they talk about writer voice. There might be writers who you like or writers that I like because of what they do and how they do it. And I think teachers are as unique as writers. So I think if you get a chance to exercise your voice, you may do something completely differently from me, and we could both be great or both be terrible or whatever on the basis of how we approach it, you know, and your approach, of course, has to be different from mine. Or Jonathan teaches math, for God's sake, you know.
So
Who can understand that?
we didn't mention this, but I do have to ask you, Rebecca, looking back on your own high school experience, who was your best math teacher ever?
I guess it has to be you because you taught me for 3 out of 3 years. So
yeah, I had to work that one in.
Because you were the only teacher she ever had, of course. So you're also the worst.
Well, no, actually, you had somebody else for a year. We won't name names.
I did.
Before we started recording, you were talking about working at Sears. I don't know if our listeners would be at all interested in that.
Did working at Sears help train you to become a teacher? I mean,
but no. So my school is in the building of Sears, in the old Sears building.
Okay. Because I always thought, you know, the Walton family, the Walmarts, they're always sticking their hands into education. I always felt like the end game was that teachers would teach classes at Walmart, and in between classes, the teachers and students would be folding clothes. Do you find yourself folding clothes much in your work?
No, luckily no. Luckily, no.
I'm glad to hear it because yeah, I would not be good at that. I don't know about you, but I would not be good at that.
No, I think it would be stressful to do retail and teaching. That's a lot to ask of a person.
Yeah, to sell your students, hey, you could use, this shirt will look great on you.
Yes. In any case, avoid the retail, Rebecca, and very good luck with the rest of your first ninth grade year. And we hope to hear really good things.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and speaking to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So thank you very much for joining us here at State of the Union. We will be back shortly. We expect to have more of Tom Sheppard and perhaps somebody else of interest. We're not sure who it is yet, but we'll let you know as soon as we do.